Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce a near and dear friend of mine and we never talk,
Yeah,
but whenever I see you, it feels like it's just been yesterday.
totally.
Veronica Monet, welcome. It is fun to use these uncertain times as an excuse to get to hang out a little bit. And I'm really excited to share with the people that follow me, like your work, because, not
Oh,
everybody knows everybody, obviously.
no, no.
So for your people who are watching this, my name is Reid Mihalko. Readaboutsex.com is my main website, REID about sex.com. I do all kinds of stuff around sex and relationships. I'm clearly labeled as a sex geek, but this human right here, Veronica, tell my people who you are and what you do, because the list is long and I can't remember everything.
Well, yeah, that's okay. So I'm Veronica Monet, and I was a high-end escort from 1989 to 2004. I was on major media. I mean, we're talking everything, CNN, Fox, all the major networks, a lot of international shows. Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, and they even featured me in a full-page article, a big old picture I hated, in the New York Times. So I was very active as an activist, and then I retired from escorting in 2004, transitioned into relationship coaching, got my certification as a sexologist and an anger management coach. And I work with couples now, trying to help them learn to stop fighting and have better sex. And I published my first book in 2005. That was through a major press back when that was available to us. I went through Penguin, and
Yeah.
that was called Sex Secrets of Escorts. Marginally, I mean, minorly successful. It's out of print here in the US, still doing very well over in Europe for some reason. And I'm working on my second book, which is Love, Lust, and Romance in the Wake of Me Too.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm excited about your second book. Wow.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Did
So-
you catch a joke?
Oh, wow. Yes. Yeah, that was
Sorry.
that was
Sorry,
a little,
it's really bad. It's really bad. What
not
are
a
you going
problem.
to say?
Not a problem. When you and I first jumped on Zoom, we started already getting caught up, but then we said, let's pause it and just kind of talk about the things, catch up in front of everybody,
Yes.
because the
'Cause
things that you and I were catching up about were really important.
Totally. And plus, you and I are both these really bold, brave people who share most of the personal details of our life in front of the public. So why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, exactly. Which also I think confuses some people a little bit. I try to do my best when I'm teaching to let people know, just because I'm super out about everything, it's not just my brand. It's actually me.
Yes.
This is my personal privacy settings are very public.
Yeah.
And I need to let people know, you're allowed to have a private life. You can be transparent and still not tell everybody everything and post everything on Facebook. And this is kind of a sign of the times. I don't think everyone's learned what that is for themselves personally, and then in relationship, intimate relationships with people. So some people think that you're lying to me because you didn't tell me everything. And I'm like, well, you get to have a private life too, everyone. That's healthy. And then the final piece, I think, which is challenging for folks, is just how do I know what I want, what my privacy settings are? Because we didn't have to learn that back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, right?
Right.
So I'm really curious for you, being so out and bold, but because you work with so many couples who, in the pressure cooker of, staying home right now, you were sharing with me, all kinds of stuff is popping.
Oh, yes, it is. I've got meltdowns right and left. We're getting a divorce. That's what's happening. And I'm like, we're doing great for shelter in place. So obviously things are accelerated, but just to backtrack a little bit and talk about disclosure, I've started something called the Shame-Free Zone quite a few years ago. I am the Shame-Free Zone. That's who I am.
Yeah.
And so when my clients come to my office in downtown Grass Valley, it says Veronica Shame-Free Zone right on the door. And they know that they can come in and talk about anything they want. And it's a very, very safe, accepting, loving container. But I do not encourage the people that I work with to go out and say as much as I do publicly. And here's the thing. I've been processing my stuff for over 30 years. And there's maybe 2 things in my life that I have not talked about and written about yet. But notice I say yet, because for me, it's all about getting to the point where I've processed it enough that I have something meaningful to share. And I'm on a mission to help extirpate shame by kind of forging ahead and saying, I don't have a problem talking about these various different aspects of my life. But I only do it when I'm at a place where I've processed it enough, I've gone through it enough, I'm on the other side of it, and I have something beautiful to share with the world. So that's not everybody's mission. They're not here to educate people about the mistakes that they've made in their lives. Not necessarily. If that is their calling, great. I will help cheer them on to do that. But I definitely don't think we're all here to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that there's certainly, like, as I do like work with people from different cultures, like all over the planet, like there is a very, like it's like a privilege, but it's also a curse of being an American, like the overachievingness, which is also in other cultures, but certainly like for me as an American, like my overachievingness like seeps into the bedroom, seeps into my relationship, seeps into everything, such that like I have clients who are struggling with, but if I don't tell my partner everything, or if I never reach a place in my processing where I can share it on Facebook, somehow I'm broken. Like I haven't achieved, I'm not evolved enough. Right. And it's like this, it's this way of like, it bites us in the ass, because I'm like, well, evolution to me is you get to choose, you have more choice in your life in a way that doesn't overwhelm you, and you get to be grounded in your decisions. So like what's evolved is you get to like what you like, you get to not like what you don't like, and that's kind of it. So like if you're not kinky, it's not that you're not evolved, it's just that like you don't like kink. Like the world needs monogamous vanilla people too. And so, but it's like this weird, but it's this weird thing because they're like, well, we like, I did your course and my partner and I tried a threesome, but I don't like it. Am I broken? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think you probably just don't like threesomes. Like,
right?
Like don't judge your life by the things I post on Facebook, please. Like what's evolved is like you give yourself permission to like what you like, which in the way that, the things that you're talking about, like I think people think the goal is to be like Veronica. And the processing and the emotional savvy and the self-awareness, yes, be like Veronica in that, but like you don't have to write a book, you don't have to post things on Facebook, like, because I think we're losing this privacy piece, which is really useful and probably really important right now when everybody's living in close quarters.
It's interesting because I was just reading an article that a colleague of mine had written about truth. That was actually the name of the article. And he wanted some feedback from me, and I will be providing that with him soon. And I'm not going to actually reveal who wrote it, but I liked what he said because I used to always autograph all of my books. The truth is always better. And that's pretty much my path. My path is very much that. But I've also realized that there is room to be strategic. And there's a fine line between being strategic and being manipulative. And I think we really have to practice some deep introspection. We really have to practice some deep accountability with ourselves, like going into ourselves and saying, why am I perhaps not talking about this right now? Is it because I don't want to experience the fallout? Well, that's self-referential. But if I feel it doesn't really help this situation or this relationship right now, it might be something better to talk about later. I think that there's space for that. And I actually teach something called the exquisite partnership formula to the couples that I work with. And it's very much about a 5-step process to saying no, which creates a heart opening. Now, some people
Mm,
feel that it's manipulative. And I'm thinking, look, I use techniques to manipulate myself, because I realize that if I don't do my gratitude list before I go to bed at night, I probably won't sleep as soundly, and I
mhm,
won't wake up with as optimistic viewpoint on life. So
mm,
am I manipulating myself by doing a gratitude list at night? Kind of. It's a technology that I know
yeah.
works with my physiology and my brain. And if I was of the mind to say, well, that's brainwashing because there's all these terrible things that are going on in the world. Okay, there are terrible things that go on in the world, but the more I focus on the positive, the better it gets. So I try to teach couples to always start off with appreciations. The Gottman Institute realized that successful long-term relationships fight just as much as the ones that end. It's just that they appreciate 5 times as often. So I
Hmm.
teach my couples to always start off with the appreciations before you go into talking about something that's potentially contentious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I've been looking at the last couple of years because because of the Me Too.
Right.
um, I stepped down from teaching because people in my sex ed community came forward and told me things that people hadn't been telling me.
Mm.
And there were some requests around changing certain ways that I do things around having become famous
Uh-huh.
in my sex ed community, because there was a way that I was negotiating and navigating consent that wasn't taking into consideration the power differential that had become
Right.
me in my industry. And what was so interesting was one of my core values, because of the family I grew up in, because we didn't have difficult conversations, we only had arguments that ended so horribly, we never talked about things again. um, Most of my work, when you boil it down, is really about practicing saying what it is you're not saying.
Uh-huh.
Like asking for what you want is a part of that, right? Because I have a
Right.
lot of sexual shame that I mean, I continue to work on it, and I love my sexual shame because it is my compass. So I just walk towards whatever I feel like people won't love me for.
Good for
And
you.
hence I am this person now, with all the threesomes and the things. But the thing was, what my community was asking me to look at was, I've gotten really good at asking for what I want and saying what it is I'm not saying. And I also have some privilege as a white man, you know, what's the quote? Like, please give me the confidence of a mediocre white man. Like, but like
Love that.
practicing using my voice and asking for what I want, or asking people like, would you like to come to an orgy?
Right.
What I wasn't taking into consideration was the power differential was making it really difficult and harmful in some cases
Right.
for me to ask so boldly without taking into consideration the power dynamics. And so there was
Totally.
and that was something that it just hadn't occurred to me in the way that it was presented to me. Like, I had done some of the things, I was tracking some of the things, but there was a whole other piece that I was just completely missing, that was right there, but
Right.
was invisible to me in certain ways. So out of that whole process, which if people are curious about it, you can go to tinyurl.com/read accountability, because
Right.
we made the whole restorative justice-based process public. But like, and this is the long story to your manipulation piece.
Right.
um I think manipulating yourself is very different than trying to get a result from somebody else and not telling them you're trying to get this result. So the transparency piece around agendas,
Yeah.
like, hey, this is, I would like to start a conversation about X, Y, and Z. Just so you know, I'm heavily invested in a particular outcome, and I should probably tell you now just to be transparent so that, I can take responsibility for that, and we can, it's more informed consent
Right.
around what's happening. To
Right.
me, that doesn't feel like manipulation. However, if the power differential is really off, then I can be as transparent as fuck.
Yeah.
And it can still have a manipulative kind of impact on you because I can't remove the power differential.
Well,
Does that make
Reid,
sense?
it does. It actually brings something to mind for me. When I was working as a high-end escort, I spoke at a lot of colleges and universities. So I was in my 30s and 40s at that
It
time.
was 5 years ago.
Nah, no.
You,
Men always make this joke about women's age. Um,
well, I was going to make a joke about my age too. It's like you and me both, lady. You and me both. We're not spring chickens anymore.
But I'm older than you, darling. So the thing that I was seeing as clients, I was seeing anybody that was 18 or older. Long as they were of legal age and they had contacted me and they wanted to see me professionally, that was fine. But when I would go in to talk to the colleges, it looks like my internet's a little unstable here. So the same group, same age group, people in their 20s, people 18 and older.
Mm-hmm.
I had a rule that if they came on to me, tried to ask me out, wanted to make an appointment with me, no way. Because
Yeah.
I had been up there at the podium standing next to their professor. And even though I didn't work for the university and legally it wasn't a fraught situation, I just felt that morally there was a way in which I, was up there speaking as an expert. And their professor had given me some kind of credibility / authority. So I just never went there. And I had offers, but I was like, nope, that's okay. Not going to happen.
And do you think it's possible for somebody to have enough agency and wherewithal for them to be able to navigate the lesser end of the power differential?
Well, I'm sure it is because I certainly have. There's
mm-hmm.
been plenty of times in my life where I navigated being the less powerful one, and I had my own sense of power. But when I was making this rule for myself, it was long before #MeToo. And I was mostly I was really aware of the power that I had when I stand in front of an audience and talk. It felt unfair to me. I didn't like the destabilizing there. I was like, I didn't feel like they were seeing me as a whole human being. They're just seeing a little snippet, and I can be very inspiring and very funny. But if it was something like they saw me out of that context repeatedly, perhaps. But it was a line that I made for myself. And that I'm not really judging the other people, whether they have that agency. They may. I just didn't want to go there. It's kind
Well,
of like keeping my side clean.
Yeah, often simpler is more powerful. Like keeping things simple, and then also speed seems to make things more tricky. Like if it's the last day of a conference and everyone's in their like scramble of our opportunities are going away, we have to try to do all the things and do all the people, like I've been very aware of that kind of scarcity, and like the Stargate is closing.
Yeah.
Right. And like, how does that warp people's wants, needs, and desires, and their ability to be making informed choices, or making choices knowing that they're in a heightened state of something? right?
One of the things you just mentioned, conferences, and it's interesting because I have a little different attitude about those. If I am in a tribe of people who have been exploring sexuality for a long time and taking lots of different classes around kink and polyamory and consent, and maybe they weren't at the podium, they weren't giving the keynote. I can think of an event you and I were at several years ago where I was actually the keynote, and I had to ask myself, did that give me too much power in sexual scenarios? And I came to the conclusion that it didn't, because of the people that I was with. I felt that those people were sophisticated and knew how to navigate consent issues regardless of their age. I don't know if that was a good decision on my part, but if I felt comfortable with it then, I still feel comfortable with it now.
Yeah.
It feels very different to me than going to Stanford University and talking to some people that might have even been older than people I might have hooked up with at that conference, because I don't think they're as sophisticated around sex, and I don't think consent would be something that's their language yet.
Yeah, I think, and this is also coming from the feedback that was offered me in my process, like
Yes.
the easiest answer is it's already tricky. I mean, all of life is tricky, right? Like, and to try to reduce anything to a bullet point bit of advice is already problematic. But basically, like, whatever you can do, like Angel at Ioha, Angel was a part of my support team, was just like, anytime you can slow it down, anytime you can pump the brakes, pumping the brakes on anything almost never bites you in the ass when it comes to sex. Yeah. Like, just slowing your roll down and talking about how complex things are is almost always, if it's a mood killer, then let it be the mood killer, because maybe the mood never should have happened, right? Like, so there's that kind of piece. And I don't think there are easy answers. And then, like, bringing this back to talking about power differentials and dynamics for couples living in close quarters now, like, I think there are similar things, and a lot of those couples aren't talking about consent and all the nuancy things that you and I geek out on.
No,
so
they
like
don't.
so like what's some of your advice, or what are you finding is been useful for couples around, like, reducing harm, reducing stress, right? In a situation where a lot of people haven't ever been in this situation ever before, like,
yeah. And
it's
I'm really
completely
glad
new.
you asked that question, and I've actually got, but before I answer that, there's just one thing I want to say. I hope that you can just accept this, and if you want to argue with it. But I have always experienced you as being somebody who is really oriented towards issues of consent. The first time I ever went to a cuddle party, of which you're a co-founder, I was just amazed at the attention to consent issues. And Betty Martin was actually facilitating it. It was in Arizona.
Betty.
Yes.
Betty, if you're watching, we love you.
We love you,
Thank
Betty.
Thank you for creating the Wheel of Consent, by the way, Betty.
Oh my God,
and,
yes.
And folks, if you're listening or watching and you haven't checked out Betty Martin's The Wheel of Consent, just Google it, because it's
all over the place.
You can find it really easy, and it's genius. It's genius.
And she's been very generous in gifting it to the world. And I actually work in concert with a sexological body worker here in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area. And she works with some of my clients. We confer with each other. I do the non-touch portion of working with couples, and then she does the touch portion. And she brings Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent into those sessions. So it's just lovely. Yeah. But anyway, we all have to look at our various different encounters and interactions with people. And I wasn't there, and I don't even know the specifics of it, but I just need to say to the world that you are actually one of my consent heroes. So And nothing that I have learned about you has detracted from that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I invite people to check out the blog because there's a lot of good, useful information on it.
There is.
And, you know, the idea of how to respond when people feel harmed, regardless of whatever you think about people and how they've responded to you in the past. This is more general for everyone.
Right.
I think there's a lot to be said for how people respond when people feel harmed. Regardless of what I think or feel, I hope that the way I was able to respond,
Yes,
and I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of some amazing people and people who do not like me also supported me in how they supported the survivors and the people who felt harmed. Like the community aspect of this,
right.
and how we can stay open and receive feedback.
Right.
I hope the accountability process helps other people figure out better ways to respond.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else to say about that other than hopefully we're all doing our best. And then hindsight is always going to be like 2020. Like as we grow as a community, it means that we will learn that we did other things not as well as we could have. And the answer isn't, the answer is, well, thank you for giving me this new information. How do I implement it? And that is so different of a way of responding, especially for me, raised as a white guy. And maybe, you know, some of these ideas are going to be helpful for people right now when you are in a pressure cooker situation that you've never been in, and everybody's off balance in lots of different ways.
Right.
You know, it's just like, I think we all look for that simple answer, that 5-step solution or that formula. And again, like even with my difficult conversation formula, it's just a tool. Like it's not like you need a hammer and a saw and like you need a lot of tools to build a house. Like you just don't build it with one tool.
Well, you do. And one of the things that I always want to bring into the work that I do with couples is the issue of trauma. So if I have not done anything that violates my standards, but my partner is triggered, then my partner is triggered. And it really doesn't matter. People kind of get invested in that, but I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm going, but you're a little kid when you say that. You're a little kid when you say, I didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about right and wrong. This is about what works. And if you're going to stay with that human being and they have triggers around certain behavior, certain voice intonations, certain touch, certain whatever their trigger is, well, and if you want to be in a relationship with them, you're going to have to honor that trigger. You're going to have to deal with it in a way that helps them heal. And we don't need to pathologize them as a designated patient either, because there's usually enough trauma responses and triggers on both sides.
Well, it is that like the joke that I came up with in when I'm teaching, which is based on my mom and dad, is like, it's learning that when the shit hits the fan, can either one of you just unplug the fan first? And my mom or my dad would get triggered, and then the other one would get triggered that the other one got triggered, and then it would just be this cascade effect. And they didn't have the tools that so many of us, you know, take pride in teaching other people and helping other people find. Because they were the generation where like you didn't even go to a therapist yet. Like we hadn't gotten that far.
We don't discuss our problems with strangers.
Well, and I'm from New England. Like I'm a WASP. So you definitely don't talk. about that. So what are you finding people are struggling with, and what's helping them in the people
Well,
that you're working with?
so one of the things that I'm teaching couples to do, you were talking about slowing down,
Mm-hmm.
is to slow down sex. I'm asking them to, at least in the beginning stages, set aside 3 hours. Stop treating this like a fast food drive-through. Um,
Veronica, if we take 3 hours, how are we ever going to watch our Netflix show together?
I don't know. Maybe just don't watch Netflix. Uh, it's fascinating
Sacrilege.
because they'll be like, well, we want to have sex every day, or we want to have sex 3 times a week. I go, maybe you could just have sex once a week for 3 to 5 hours. How about that? Try to go for quality. Because I really want them to deepen that connection. And part
Mm-hmm.
of the process is having permission to stop sex, to discuss difficult topics, to talk
Mm.
about trauma responses, to go into those feelings. And that's part of my sexual journey. I'm a rape survivor, an incest survivor. I absolutely need that in order to blossom sexually. And I have not really discovered anybody who doesn't have some kind of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be complex like mine. I had a very, very abusive upbringing, but it still exists. And then we've got kind of cultural PTSD, which is
Yeah.
kind of in our DNA, passed down from the people that came before us. So whether they were burned at the stake or, imprisoned at a concentration camp or fought in a war, most of us are carrying some trauma.
Yeah.
And sex is a beautiful opportunity to actually heal that trauma if you know how to use it. You don't just go into sex and create more trauma. And I find too many couples engage in sex that is disconnected, unconscious, and sometimes unpleasant because they feel kind of obligated to each other. And this happens with all genders, by the way. I've talked to men who have sex out of obligation. I've talked to women
Mm-hmm.
who have sex out of obligation. It's really sad to me that that becomes part of the relationship narrative, that we can't be honest about what we're feeling. And I think the fear is that if I express the fact that I'm not enjoying this sex, that somehow or another we won't have sex at all. And
Well,
personally,
there,
I think
there,
if you can fine tune what it is you like and what you don't like, and sometimes if your partner can actually be there and help you process that trauma, show up for it, you could get past it. Not always. There's maybe some things that will never work for you, but at some point, just having another human being validate that and honor
yeah.
the boundary makes you safe enough to experiment with pushing yourself past some of those limitations.
Well, and it's not even, it's like, it's not even the pushing past, right? It's more of an easing into in a, it's so interesting when
Yeah, I
you
better
know,
word,
cause
much better word.
well, but it's also really useful to think about like how, like using words that people are using, right? Cause again, like for me, I have to push past this thing to prove something.
Mm-hmm.
Also as a dude and as somebody who's over 50 now, like when I
I didn't
can't
know
get it
you're over
up,
50. Okay.
yeah, I'm not that young,
I
Veronica.
thought you were
But
the younger man.
but the, you know, whatever you need to think about to make it work, go for it. I'm good. But the thing being like, you know, I teach this stuff for a living, and when I'm in a situation where my lover or lovers really want to get fucked and I can't get it up, there's a whole slippery slope of things my brain starts doing to me that is completely unhelpful for me finding my erection anywhere in the room. And I
Uh-huh.
know the tool, like I know what's happening. I can parse it out. I can talk, I can call a timeout. I have all these tools,
Right.
but the cultural program is still there. And all I
Right.
have to do is double click it and it'll run fine. And like helping people be able to see how culture for the most part is fucking with us.
Totally. And
And
not in a good
then,
way.
yeah, exactly. Like it's fucking us over. And how do we have, like, how do you slow it down? How do you have that self-awareness? How do you stay in your body? and also bring your brain with it, together. It's not about like killing off your brain, but like, how do we juggle all those things and another person who might be having a cascade effect for themselves of being like, oh my God, he can't get it up. He must not love me, or I'm not hot, or that 5 pounds from the pandemic is really, killing our sex, like all the things. So it's like, how do we both call a timeout? And then I recognize, honey, I've got all this stuff going on. And then you can be like, I've got all this stuff going on. And we're like, okay, now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can still make love with all the stuff going on. If I can't get it up, I've got toys. I've got these right now. Like, we have other options.
Yes, but you know what I think is hotter, Reid? Is
Wow.
like, okay, so you can't get it up. So let's actually go into that. Let's be in that together. Let's actually have those feelings together. Because in my experience, being able to, you were talking about slowing down. Let's
Yeah.
not rush to find a substitute. Let's not
Mm.
rush to make it work some
Oh, I
other
see what you're
way.
saying. Yeah.
How about just enjoy the fact that you're having an emotion?
Mm.
I mean, breathe together, feel our hearts beating together, just
Mm.
really explore that form of intimacy. It's
Yeah.
in my experience, at least in an intimate relationship, I'm not so sure, I haven't tried this out in one night stands or very casual connections. I'm talking about intimacy here, and I work with couples who want to be very emotionally intimate with each other. But it's
Yeah.
been my experience that there's something really beautiful about our fear. There's
Mm.
something really beautiful about the parts of ourselves that are traumatized and that are maybe contracted and shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and instead of trying to figure out how to get over it, get into it, go
Yeah.
into it.
I can tell you, as somebody who has taken the things we're talking about and applied them to casual hookups,
Yes.
there is a little bit of an advantage to being a man who then is vulnerable with somebody in a casual hookup.
Okay.
Because also, like, I'm not spiraling, I'm not in some sort of shame or anxiety spiral. I'm still able to be present. But what I've noticed is most of those situations, the person I'm with is like, I feel more connected to you now in a weird way. Like, this is kind of hot that you're being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the vulnerability is often whatever needs to come next, which
Right.
still you're keeping the connection rather than avoiding it. And so many people want to avoid the shame or the awkward or not share it because we're supposed to be some sort of perfect whatever,
Everybody's
fuck
trying to be a
machine.
porn star or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been in those moments, like, and it might also be that I'm just picking really awesome people to begin with,
Well, I would
but
imagine that you are, but
I haven't been shamed for being vulnerable in the moment, even in a casual
even
situation.
in a casual situation, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, there have been times where somebody's been like, I'm kind of not into, like, I was really just kind of, I just want to,
Yeah.
like, a zipless fuck. And
Right,
I'm like,
right, right.
okay, but like, I need like 3 minutes to get back into that headspace, and
Yeah.
if that's not enough, cool. But at least then we're both talking about what we want,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
which is its own form of vulnerability too. Like, so it's
Totally.
very interesting, but because people don't talk about it because we get so caught up in our heads, that other opportunity is never there.
Well, we
It
have
never
a lot of
presents itself.
performance. Everybody of all genders have a lot of performance anxiety, at least in this culture.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say
and
that's probably true for almost all cultures. I say at least 90%.
well, we've gotten so globalized now that how
Yeah.
could it not be? It's really spread. Everybody's
Mm,
trying on social media. They're trying to kind of present their best foot forward, all the
yeah.
fun they're having, all the great stuff. They leave out all the crap, right?
Yeah.
And so then they get naked with each other, and they're still trying to do Instagram. It's kind of
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
So
so people slowing down.
Slowing down and inviting the gnarly feelings. Just like, you know, you're talking about inviting the difficult conversations. I think invite the gnarly feelings. Don't run away from them, because I feel like that's what the juice is. If you are able to process a gnarly emotion together as a team, you get on the other side of that. Sometimes, oftentimes, not always, but it can just kind of like burst your hearts open so that you end up having this ecstatic sexual experience. But again, 3 hours really works. You know, to go into that stuff, to process that, to stop and talk, to never ever look at it as a failure. Like, we judge it. We go, oh, something went wrong. I can't get an erection, or I'm getting triggered when you touch my breasts. No, that's not a bad thing. It actually, what it tells me is that this situation is evoking enough trust for those vulnerabilities to come to the surface. And if it, so then great. I'm so glad it's here. I'm glad you trust me enough to be vulnerable, and let's be with this together. And, you know, if we can talk about it, great. If not, maybe we'll just spoon and see what happens after we breathe with each other for a while.
Yeah. I mean, most people haven't had the experience of getting triggered together and then riding it out and regrounding together. Like that, my family of origin was, we got triggered, we slammed some doors, and then we avoided each other until we calmed down enough to pretend like it didn't happen.
Oh, hell yes.
And that's not a recipe for a healthy relationship.
No, it's not. And, you know, Reid, I have a suspicion that you and I both got into relationship coaching because of dysfunctional families.
Well, you know, I've talked to enough therapists and other coaches, and I would say that we have a lot of that in common, all of us.
I'm sure. I know for me, when I'm able to help a couple reconcile their issues and get their sex life back on track, it's like it's a healing salve for that little girl who sat there and listened to mom and dad fight and argue for hours and hours and days and days and years and no solution.
Yeah. I feel like the intention for this recording, because Zoom wasn't connecting with Facebook, was for us to do a little Facebook Live, and now this has been like an hour.
Has it really?
I feel
it's flown by.
Yeah, well, because you're so easy to talk to, which is why I imagine your clients get so much reward from working with you. So let's wrap this up, because you also wanted to record a podcast for your podcast. So, like, tell people where they can find you and all the wonderful things that you do.
Okay, that sounds great. They can find me at theshamefreezone.com and go over there and get the 10,000 word full color free ebook, Exquisite Partnership Formula, plus access to 200 plus hours of radio shows.
Thank you so much. It was so good to see you again. Like, we have to do this more, basically.
Yes, we do. I was like, we haven't actually done this before. We've worked together.
Like, I see you for 5 minutes or a short, burst of time, and then we're on our separate ways. But I mean, I always read your emails. I just feel like I feel connected to you. So I don't feel disconnected. And thank you again for doing what you do out in the world. I really appreciate it.
You too, Reid. You too. I have great admiration and love for you.
All right. We're bringing this in for a landing.
All right.